On past episodes of Exploring North Carolina, we have introduced you to some very special women in science. You've met wildlife biologist Wendy Stanton, who works with the birds of winter at Pocosin Lakes National Wildlife Refuge. One of North Carolina's leaders in science education is Mary Ann Britton. You saw her on the Roanoke River with her favorite green tree frog. One of the most unusual occupations for men or women is bear biologist. Colleen Offenbuttel is the bear biologist for the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. On the Cape Fear River, paleontologist Dr. Julia Clark introduced us to the connections between modern birds and ancient dinosaurs. And in several episodes, you have met North Carolina's first woman of the natural sciences, Dr. Betsy Bennett, director of the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. You will see very little of me in the next 30 minutes, because in this episode, we will feature some of the most accomplished women scientists and educators in the natural sciences today. They are representative of the women found in virtually all fields of science and research. We hope you will enjoy meeting women in science. Great scientists and naturalists who happen to be women are nothing new. In fact, the person most often credited as the founder of the modern environmental movement is Rachel Carson, whose most famous book, Silent Spring, sounded the trumpet for a cleaner environment. In the late 1930s, Rachel Carson spent time on the Barrier Islands across from Beaufort, among the birds and horses. It is no accident that my wife and I named our daughter Rachel. As with Rachel Carson and the women you will meet today, we wanted both our son and daughter to have the same options and opportunities in education and in the workplace. In doing Exploring North Carolina, we have seen some tough jobs in the sciences. Case in point, recently we met two biologists, Nicole Loft and Adrian Michaelis, whose daily routine, both physical and technical, makes most jobs look easy.
A typical day for us, wake up 4:30, and we're usually meeting each other at the office by about 5 a.m. and loading into our pickup truck with our canoe and heading to Lake Waccamaw area, the swamp, the Lake Waccamaw swamp, and going out there canoeing sometimes, a lot of times just walking in and doing bird surveys all day. Very long day, but we really love it.
You'll be surprised to learn what these biologists are looking for.
Our goal here is to really gather an overall baseline database of the bird species that occur here. No one's ever done this work before. It's a great, remote, very inaccessible location to many people. But also, in addition to that, happens to be within the historical range of the ivory-billed woodpecker. So definitely every day we go out with the possibility that, yes, one was sighted here before. The most confirmed sighting was about 1809 or 1811, depending on what source you gather that from.
Nicole's partner, Adrian Michaelis, is also a field biologist for Audubon, North Carolina.
Really, with this project, we do have to deal with rough terrain. Often we're hiking through mud and, knee-deep in black water. But really, I wouldn't have it any other way. We get to be outdoors all the time. I've always been interested in conservation biology. And so here in particular is an area where very few people get to go, and we spend our week out here. There are definitely some dangers associated with the job, and we had the potential of running into poisonous snakes or alligators or different things. But really, we haven't had any situation, I think, where either of us has felt unsafe out here. We're used to working out in the wild by ourselves, And so the fact that we have someone else to spend the day with kind of ensures that we're gonna make it okay.
We are definitely out there by ourselves in the middle of nowhere with the snakes and the bugs and the ticks and the bears. I'm not the biggest fan of the bears, but everything else I really don't mind. I love it. It doesn't bother me. A lot of people being in the middle of nowhere would be very uneasy, but it's very peaceful and it's quiet, and I can't think of a better day spent than spent in the middle of a swamp, in the middle of, you know, Mother Nature, and sitting there taking it all in.
I asked both of them about a typical day in their 100,000-acre office.
Although I never imagined myself spending 40 hours a week tromping through a swamp, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I've been interested in conservation biology from an early age and have done work in a lab, I've done work in an office, and now I actually get to be out here hands-on doing the groundwork for projects that could have implications, whether it be in policy or just in education. And so I'm really happy to be out here, being able to see everything firsthand, and who knows if this will be here, 50 years from now. And so the fact that I'm able to be a part of it is great.
On our typical 2-hour sit, we travel to a location, a point predetermined, and we pull out all of our equipment, our camera and our video camera and our sound equipment, sound recording equipment. And the first thing we do is settle down for about 10 minutes. This is all to protocol. Let everything settle down, the birds settle down for 10 minutes, and then we do a 10-minute point count. And we write down in 3-minute, 5-minute, and then 10-minute in the increments of those 3, all the birds we have seen and heard within 50 meters or greater than 50 meters away from us. Species that we encounter most on our 2-hour sits and just being in the swamp are definitely the northern parula, prothonotary warbler, the red-eyed and wide-eyed vireos, and then you have your flyovers of the turkey vultures and the American crows and your more typical, and definitely woodpeckers. I have a lot of red-bellied woodpeckers and pileated woodpeckers.
How physical is this job?
There is definitely a physical side to this position, to this job. It doesn't bother me at all, though. I love nothing more than sloshing through the swamp and up and over trees and canoe up and down off the truck, but I love it.
By the time we get home every day, we don't feel like we need to rush out to the gym. Between the hiking, the climbing over trees, we're paddling a canoe all the time. We get a workout in. We pretty much work every muscle group. We've definitely built up our swamp feet, so we're a little more adept than we would have been 8 months ago in hiking through this.
I ask why this job is satisfying both professionally and personally.
It has some global implications because most of the birds that we see here are migrants, so it's not only important what's going on here, but also where they're migrating to or from. For some of the neotropical migrants, if conservation efforts here are working, but maybe not in Belize where they're migrating from, then we have that dichotomy where it's not gonna matter what's happening here.
It's always been a love of mine to be outdoors, and so it was a very natural career choice for me to go into. I have a degree in marine biology and really like the coastal side of it, but also really like the wetlands too, the work in the swamp and the wetlands, and did a lot of wetland delineation for a couple years also before coming to Audubon. The conservation side is definitely my favorite though.
Dr. Mary Higby Schweitzer is an associate professor at North Carolina State University and curator of paleontology at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. Some jobs in the sciences require hard work in the field and in the most sophisticated university science laboratories. Dr. Mary Schweitzer is one of the most celebrated American scientists in paleontology, but her work is not without controversy. Unlike many scientists who go directly from college to graduate school, Mary Schweitzer had a life in between.
I think that the non-traditional approach I took to science was pretty critical to how I think about my scientific questions. I actually had a life. I've done everything from sell snow cones to be a bank teller. And I think that each one of those professional experiences that I've had has really shaped how I think about the questions that I ask. A lot of my training and my classwork has been in classic straight biology. I've taught histology to medical students. I'm used to looking under the microscope and working with the biology of animals, the biology of living material. Basically, I treat dinosaurs the same way. And I guess coming at it as an older person with this background, I wasn't smart enough to know that some of these things aren't possible. So I look at my dinosaurs like I would look at a living organism rather than something that's part rock. And I think that's made all the difference in the world with how I approach my work.
What is it that Mary Schweitzer has found that separates her from past generations of stone and bone paleontologists? She is often credited with being the first molecular paleontologist.
Well, I think, first of all, it's very nice for people to credit me with starting molecular paleo, but I stand on the shoulders of giants, and I really haven't done that. Molecular paleontology is the study of all molecules related to living critters in the fossil record. And of course, that began with archaeologists looking at relatively recent bone for what might be preserved there, things like mammoth and, you know, in some cases, human remains. I think that what I've done is just taken that one step further and looked at dinosaurs because dinosaurs are my first love. One of the cutting edge technologies that my mentor Jack Horner was known for is introducing histology, or the study, microscopic study of tissues preserved in the rock record. And so he brought the study of what can we tell about the makeup at the microscopic level of bone. So 555 was one of the first specimens I worked on to learn histological techniques, how to make a thin section of bone, how to take that bone and make it thin enough for light to pass through, to study the microstructure of what was present in the living animal. And from that we can get at ideas like maybe how fast the animal grew, how long it took it to get to maturity.
An accidental discovery in Mary's laboratory changed everything.
Well, as with most breakthroughs in science, it was completely accidental. And I take absolutely no credit for looking for in advance soft tissues. Like everyone else, I wasn't real sure that this was possible. What I was looking for with my technician at the time was to verify an idea I had that we had a female dinosaur that was pregnant. And this is because we found completely unique bone tissue. It was hard, lining the long bone cavities where the marrow would sit.
Mary and her colleagues used an acid etching technique designed to remove minerals from the bones of modern birds.
And in the process, that acid etching went a little too far. And when my technician went to pick the pieces up out of the solution that we were using, they kind of went, yeah. And she came running out to tell me what had happened. And when I went to look for myself, my first thought was, this is not real. It can't be happening. My second thought was, I am not telling anybody about this under penalty of death, because I knew how controversial it was going to be. But as with all science, one of the hallmarks is repeatability. And we repeated the experiment, I don't know, a dozen times and got the same result.
In looking at other bones of dinosaurs not associated with reproduction, Mary observed additional materials that appeared to be organic rather than mineral.
That's when things got really interesting, because we went from stretchy, pliable matrix that's consistent with collagen to finding structures that look like blood vessels. And inside the blood vessels were reddish material that looks a lot like degraded blood. And this is all just looking, it's not chemistry. And then finding cells that were consistent in morphology with bone cells that secrete the matrix. And with each one of these discoveries that occurred over a period of about a month, I don't even know how to put what I was feeling into words for those times, because I realized I was pretty much on the threshold of overturning what we knew about the fossilization process, what we knew about how molecules and cells and tissues degrade or don't, and opening up a whole new avenue of investigation.
The discovery by Mary and her team of soft tissue from a 65-million-year-old dinosaur drew immediate accolades and numerous questions from fellow paleontologists.
It has been incredibly controversial, but there is so much to learn, and the potential is so high that I think it's worth it. Looking back and knowing then what I know now, I'm not sure I would have pursued that. And so, you know, I expected the controversy. It is the job of the scientific community to do exactly that, to question, and to question, show me the data.
I asked Mary about the implications of her discovery.
I think the idea that molecules and cells and tissues can persist across geological time has, if it's supported by other workers in the future, changed the shape of how we study extinct organisms. We can look at dinosaurs now not just as relics in the rock record, but we can study them the way biologists study biology and ask completely different questions that we thought would always be beyond what we could approach with science. So I think it's a really exciting time to watch this change in direction in paleontology and in how we ask our questions. Whether it is supported, I mean, come back and ask me the questions 10 years from now, because that's the true test of science and scientific validity, is when other investigators have the same tools and the same material, will they come up with the same results? Hopefully they will. Realistically, if they don't, I'll be retired. But that is the ultimate test, time and other investigators.
I asked Mary if women approach science and research in a different way.
I think what's really intriguing to me is that women ask different questions of the same subject matter, and they ask them in a different way. And I've only started noticing this recently, but I think that the addition of women to the science of paleontology has brought about a new depth and maybe a new rigor that wasn't there before. I can't say that women are totally responsible for that, but I think women in science in general reflect the trends in the greater community or the greater culture, that women have a greater role, they have more power, they have more independence than they did 30, 40 years ago, and more freedom. And I think whenever you free a human spirit, you just stand back and watch what's going to happen. There are amazing scientists that happen to be women. And I think that's the way we all hope to be seen. We're scientists who happen to be women, we're scientists who happen to be black, we're scientists who happen to be Native American. First, we're scientists.
Along with great researchers and scientists, there must be communicators, women and men, who have the skill and passion to work with scientists and interpret their work for the rest of us. There is no better educator or communicator than Liz Baird of the North Carolina Museum of Natural Science.
I've always loved science, and even as a little girl made observations of things around me. I can remember collecting a cocoon and my mom letting me put it between the screen and the window through the winter so that we could see the moth emerge when spring came. And when I graduated from college, I thought I wanted to do research. And my first job was actually at a medical school, and I was drawing people's blood as part of the research project. But I was volunteering at a science museum, and I soon realized that I needed more contact with people, and that my passion was really for helping tell the story of science and not necessarily sitting at the computer. From there, I went on to teaching and had the opportunity to join the museum and jumped on that and have never looked back.
What is it about the natural sciences that still excites Liz every day?
Of course, I'm biased. I think the natural sciences are just the best career field there is. And it's perfect for men and women because you can do anything you want within the realm of natural sciences. If you want to be outside and spend your time catching butterflies and fish and figuring out who they are and where they came from, you can do that. If you want to work a really intense field season collecting a bunch of data for about 4 weeks and then have the whole rest of the year analyzing it, you can do that. If you want to lie awake and watch the stars at night, you can do that. There's no limit as to what you can do in natural sciences. There are people who wear white lab coats and analyze the genetic data of our different species, and they're still part of the natural science realm. I think that being a part of the natural sciences helps us understand the world and helps us figure out ways to care for it.
Like all good science educators, Liz does not just read about the natural world, she lives it. Few people have her technical skills, passion, and ability to teach others. Like other men and women before her, she was inspired by one of the great scientists and educators of recent generations.
Rachel Carson just amazes me. She had the ability to look at science, which sometimes can be a little bit hard and unapproachable, and turn it into something that we all can enjoy. When I think of what we do at museums, what we try to do is inspire that sense of wonder that Rachel Carson really tapped into. And scientists are passionate about their work, but when they give a paper or give a talk, that passion doesn't come through. And Rachel Carson was able to turn the passion for the natural world into something that was approachable for all of us. I know she spent time here in North Carolina, and some of her early work out on an island inspired her reflections on birds. And she didn't look at them as just numbers, and she didn't look at them as just a species. She turned them into wondrous creatures that we should all enjoy. And that's a gift that we really need to appreciate.
Now that you have heard from some very special women in science, is there a lesson for educating future generations? Mary Schweitzer speaks for many of us.
I think giving children the freedom and teaching them how to see is one of the most valuable gifts you can give, and that's not going to happen in front of a computer screen. It's not going to happen when they're texting their friends. It's going to happen by putting them outside, giving them a magnifying glass and saying, go to it. Children are naturally curious. They are naturally scientists, and they know what makes sense and what doesn't, but they don't need to be taught that. They need to be trained in what they already know. And I think that curbing their imagination by giving them everything on a platter is doing them a great disservice. I think it's critical to get your kids outdoors and to keep them outdoors and to give them the freedom to explore.